And we're live on YouTube. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in the NPM RFCs repo, issue 530. I'll copy and paste that for folks. And feel free to, if you haven't already, add yourself to the attendees list in the meeting notes doc, which I will just make sure it's been spammed a couple times in the chat. Feel free to add yourself there. Quick reminder, these calls are all run under a code of conduct. We ask that you please be kind to each other and wait for others to finish speaking or raise your hand if you'd like to make a point, and we'll call on you. And the code of conduct there is linked. Another sort of announcement here is that the OpenJS World, which is happening in conference, which is happening in June, looks like potentially they've extended their CFP out a week roughly. So if you were considering putting up a presentation, you got a little bit more time there. Feel free to join us. Most of our team hopefully will attend either virtually or in person, or potentially speaking would be really great if we could. And we'll definitely be participating in the Collab Summit, which will happen shortly after the conference. One other quick note, which I shared here in the channel before, but the State of JS 2021 just came out as well. The NPM CLI was a bit of focus there. Our mono repo support and tooling in general is a bit of a focus this year, which is awesome to see. So, that's great to hear that, the investments we've been making this past year are paying off, and that folks are interested in consuming workspaces, the workspaces features, as well as interested in seeing what we do next. So any other announcements folks want to share? If not, we can dive into, oh, go ahead, Fritz.
I want to shout out congrats to Jordan on his board appointed to the board, silver director, something like that. Don't have gold, but I got silver.
Thank you.
It's Reddit silver, so sorry. But congrats either way.
Yeah, thanks for noting that, Owen. I forgot to mention, yeah, Jordan, you've been added to the board of directors at the OpenJS Foundation. I think that's awesome. I'm excited to see what you do there. I don't know how you have the energy and time that you do to keep up with all the different conversations that I know you're a part of. But I appreciate that you're the, sense of reason a lot of the times in a lot of conversations. So I really appreciate, on behalf of the community, I appreciate that you're, still investing your time and effort there. So
thanks. Happy to help.
Cool. Jumping into the relatively small agenda we had. I know Nil from our team wasn't able to join here, but it's PR 525. This is stop ignoring or start ignoring and stop storing integrity values for Git dependencies, and I'll share that RFC here. I guess as a quick high-level synopsis of this, we've been noticing that we can't consistently create integrity values across platforms. So with the recent M1 chip change in MacBooks and just in general, we've had this problem bite us many times where folks are generating lock files with the integrity values that are for Git deps that are not consistent across the machines that they're using, and this causes a lot of churn. It causes a lot of breakage and just a lot of confusion for folks. So this proposal that Nov put together here essentially addresses that by saying, in the next major, can we drop the integrity value altogether for Git dependencies, especially since we don't really manage Git dependencies. They're not coming from the registry. Can this be another sort of thing that we sort of drop on the floor? It's sort of an indication again that Git dependencies are not the same as packages hosted in the npm registry, and you don't have the same level of security around those. Definitely, like it's a bit of a code smell for sure, but we feel like this might be the only path forward to fix sort of the problem that we have right now. I saw Jordan, you had commented here. I'm not sure if anybody else had comments or questions on this. Right.
Yeah, I think this is related, might be unrelated to this RFC. I'm definitely behind this, the original idea for this RFC here, but I might even go further and just propose a question here. What if we just, maybe not a deprecation, but we kind of steered users away from ever using Git dependencies like that? So I kind of been, I'd say that because I've been working this week with a little bit touching the parts of the code in Pacochi that handles Git dependencies, and it is not good. So it's, so I don't know. I feel like we could even expand this RFC, or maybe a second one that could expand on this to maybe just put as, as a best practice. Maybe we go ahead and even deprecate through warnings in case someone is using Git dependency in their install tree, because most users, they won't even be aware of. So maybe that's separate discussion. Like maybe can we have separate, but I'm definitely on board with the idea here, because it's it's kind of we couldn't come up with a better solution than this. So yeah.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Well, yeah. So I had the question in chat about, is there I don't know if there's an integrity hash stored for file dependencies, like bundled deps thing. It basically like, and the leading question there is, it seems like the only thing that makes sense to store an integrity hash for is something that comes from a registry. And if this doesn't completely get us there, then could we extend it so it does? And then to Roy's question, it's already been a best practice for a long time that Git is for development, not consumption. And you should only ever npm install from registries for many, many years. It's a critical thing to be able to do for certain edge cases and workflows and stuff. So I would love to see it deprecated as long as no one ever expects to remove it.
Yeah, I think maybe long-term, what we should do, I agree about, only storing integrity checks for packages that are in a registry. I think maybe long-term we look at this as saying, if you have Git dependencies locally, that's fine. But as soon as you have Git dependencies that are tertiary, right, we should warn, and maybe long-term, the default would be to not resolve those dependencies.
Well, I mean,
but in the short term,
as much as I would love a world where Git deps weren't allowed in transitive, like in published packages, basically, I don't think that's practical either. As like, I'm as everyone I'm sure who talks to me for more than 5 minutes knows, I have lots of strong opinions. And one of those includes the one I already voiced, which is that you should never install from Git. However, in this case, the times that I have seen people need to install from Git, or that I have needed to install from Git, are like, it was the only solution. So if we somehow disallow that, then packages published that otherwise would have a Git dep would be forced to fork and publish something just to wait for a PR, or just for some sort of, unpublished change. And I suspect that that will probably have unintended consequences that we all don't want. So I do feel that we should commit to always allowing Git deps to be installed in all the ways that they are now. But because like deprecation means two things in general, right? One, and it can be one or both of them. One of them is discouragement, and the other one is eventual, warning that it will be removed. I think that discouragement is always a wonderful use case of deprecation, but in this case, I don't think it would actually be a good thing to ever remove it in any way. But I am super stoked about strongly discouraging it.
Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, and just once again, I'm going to propose adding a config value so that we can opt in to the behavior of just skipping Git dependencies, right? Like making that an error. Then that can be added in a minor version of NPM. Then eventually in the future, we can flip that switch and make that the default behavior if we ever decide to make so.
Yeah, that's one way forward for sure. And definitely something that we could provide as like a feature that will add some value. I think not even, so we've been talking about warnings, we're talking about deprecation of Git deps, which kind of like goes off into a new tangent that isn't really associated even with like this specific RFC, but it's definitely something that came up as we were looking at this. And especially as we're considering how do we create, and I've said this before in these calls, how do we create more stability in installations, and how do we create reproducible builds? Like, how can we do that? How can we get closer to that goal? Part of that is removing the mutable deps, and a Git dependency is a mutable dep, and a third-party dependency like a tarball is another example. Is potentially another artifact that you might not trust. It's not the, so as we've talked about this internally, one thing that's come to mind for me personally is not maybe even warning or deprecating these or not supporting these types of dependencies, but just surfacing the information that is critical for end users to make decisions about and to be warned about these types of dependencies. And I think that information is the hosts. And so if we were to, similar to the deprecation warnings UX that we've just, that whole process we went through to clean up the UX of deprecations, at least in the RFC, there could be potentially a line item post install, which notes the number of host names or domains in which packages were fetched from. So if we say 100 packages installed from 5 hosts, that's going to be indication, I think, or a code smell, I think, enough to end users to go dig into like, where did these packages come from? That sounds kind of scary potentially, right? Like I didn't realize that transitive dependency was actually being pulled in from this other type of host. And it sounds like there's a feature there that we could introduce, which allows you to query kind of that type of information, and more general purpose query functionality is definitely on our radar right now. But that sort of information over sort of deciding for the end users like what they care about is probably important to bubble up first and foremost, and then we can also provide features to like then ignore those types of deps if you want to, or to dig into that. Jordan, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Node has a policies feature which NPM doesn't look at, and it's fine that it doesn't look at it yet, but one of the things people will use that feature for is, I want to prevent my Node programs from calling out to internet places that I don't know about, so things can't be exfiltrated. NPM post install scripts and dependency fetching do not have that benefit. So it might be useful to explore, not as part of this RFC, obviously, but explore NPM respecting Node's policy features because then dependency fetching as well as install script network access could perhaps be gated in similar ways.
Definitely. Yeah. I know Bradley had come to the RFC calls last year or the year before, even talking about the work that was being done with the I think is it still experimental policies feature.
Probably.
And I likened that concept to what I've seen work in the web extension ecosystem with web manifest files and permissions, because permissions map back to like the access that an extension is going to be granted by the end user, and so that includes access to browser tabs, to certain information within the browser context, and I think where we landed was a lot of folks are just going to turn on everything or nothing, and then we kind of got into the nuts and bolts of like what ends up happening with these types of features, and the concern that especially when we're talking about packages that still may or may not, as soon as a package has file system access, can it potentially overwrite. It's never going to be like properly sandboxed as far as I can tell. Like there's not going to be a way that you can ensure that the policies file doesn't potentially also get mucked with during installation or prior to installation, or in transit. Like I think that was kind of the concern I had with like that type of feature.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, this is also still more off topic, but there is something to be said for moving us toward an ecosystem where package maintainers declare capabilities of their that their package needs, and like where application users could then decide if they want to permit certain capabilities, or they could sort of generate or add to the lock file, saying this package only needs these capabilities. So if suddenly a patch version of this package starts needing file system access, either don't allow it or don't install it or whatever. Like there's a lot of obvious things there. And I wonder if tying that into this would help, because similarly, a package could declare it needs Git dependencies from this URL. And then that could be something that application users decide to explicitly allow.
Yeah, I'm just concerned of what that looks like. What does that API look like? Because the policies
I don't think we're going to design it in this call.
No, but like looking at going back to the conversations we had previously, like the policies API right now is very verbose. Like it's very like you need tooling to almost generate the policy file for you, or the policy config, because it deals with like paths, and yeah, it's I think really tough, because especially like that nuance of giving this one package access to Git deps, like how do I express that in package JSON, let's say, right? Like how do I easily express that? So it may be that npm does introduce like some kind of, and I keep going back to what the browser and web extension ecosystem has done, because the permissions field in the web manifest spec is I think the closest thing and most succinct thing that I think that we could potentially offer. But the only enforcement that we can provide as a package manager is we can only enforce those policies during installation, and not like because we're not the runtime, that has to then translate somehow to the runtime, right? So there's that's the concern I have, is that we might be able to enforce those policies on our end, but then potentially code still can execute later on when somebody executes something with like the node runtime. So yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts or feelings on this? Like, is the going back just to the actual context of this RFC, like if we dropped the integrity field for Git deps just in general in the next major, nobody's going to really complain, I would hope.
The only question I would have is, doesn't tooling already have to assume that there might not be an integrity field? So who would it, if so, who would it break to remove it now?
True.
So kill it?
Okay, you let me circle back on that, but that's a good like, does it need to be a major, I guess, is the point you're making.
Yeah.
Can we, yeah, okay. Yeah, we've obviously got some like high profile maintainers like poking us on this, which is why it's come to our forefront again. So yeah, it might be good
I mean,
to
in a
fix it.
simple path, of course, is ship a config option, have people test it out, and if nothing breaks, maybe try. I don't know if that would make it major, but
Yeah, it's tough to like with something like this. It's tough to, I think, get folks to use a config like it's. Do you actually get enough data back from folks? Like this,
Yeah,
is the sample size big enough? And since we feel that right now, basically the feature is broken, right? That's what we're saying. Like the generating integrity value is not consistent across machines. So like that for Git depth. So that like if the feature is broken, it's not doing what we intended it to do. So it's like it's almost like we could almost float it in a patch and just remove it.
Removing it is a bug fix. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point, Jordan. We'll take that note and then circle back on this. Unless anybody else had any other thoughts, feelings on the more general, broader Git deps narrative we were talking about. Okay, jump down to the next RFC, or actually this PR 522, adding an option for npm diff to ignore new line or carriage returns. Roy, I think we had spoke about this internally. I think what we wanted to do was essentially map to whatever get diff supports. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, I was just mentioning that like for npm diff, we're basically copying everything from get diff, their options. We just prefix everything with diff to avoid the hazard of different commands maybe having conflicting flag names. But yeah, we should just, I believe we should just do the same here for adding this option. Like some people, it's kind of the philosophy we had when we set out to work on npm diff. Like let's do the minimal viable product here. Let's ship it, get it to the hands of the community, get people using it. And as we go, like we see that maybe some important parts are missing, like this one here, we can then just queue it up for work later.
Cool. So pretty much +1 on landing this. We can probably accept it. If I look at,
Yeah. I'd say we take maybe another week to review it and then just approve next call.
yeah, I might like the name of the flag is the only thing I'm not like a huge fan of, but
yeah, I'd say we follow. I personally, I'd like to just follow the standard. Like I don't want to get into the merit if it's a good standard or not, but basically the names of the flags right now are the same as in Git, but it's prefixed with diff. So I'd say let's just stick to the same standard, because that's what users will expect, right?
do you know what the flag name is in Git diff?
I think it's ignore CR. I think it's mentioned there, ignore CR EOL, the long version of it. I don't know if there's a short.
Okay, diff ignore CR at EOL is the Git version. Okay. Cool. Let's ratify in a week. Awesome. Any other feedback on that? Moving on to the next item we had, which is PR 4260. This is actually a pull request that we had opened by the white source team to add a reify hook to Arborist. I know that they joined a few weeks back, aren't on this call today. This continues to be something we're investigating though, and I guess the update here is, this is something we could still land within, not potentially this PR explicitly, but a tree mutation event is a lifecycle event that we could still land, and we probably will land within the NPM v8 lifecycle. Since so many people release lifecycle, I mean, since so many people are asking us for this. Fritzy, I see. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that this this PR was migrated from Arborist to the main one, so I'm not actually the author there. The other thing I wanted to say is that, you know, I think we need to be careful about adding hooks as a feature. And, you know, related to some of our script like event life cycles discussions in the past, where there's a work in progress RFC. I almost think that like these kinds of eventing features should not be surfaced in NPM, the CLI itself, but maybe if you use Arborist directly, you could hook into these things. And I think that you know, hooks or however scripts or however it's implemented within Arborist, I think would make sense, because we definitely do need those events, but exposing that to, you know, NPM opens us up to exploitation by packages during the install process. So I think maybe, you know, short term, it's fine to have hooks in Arborist. And medium term, we're talking about, you know, some changes to those workflows in Arborist anyway, and then long term, I think we need to be careful about what we expose to the lifecycle scripts.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like if we agree that we're going to add them to Arborist, then people are just knocking at our door as to why we don't go with the one step further to then add support to. So it's I say, like, if we cave on adding hooks into Arborist, we have to have a good story why, like, we're like it just like needs documentation. So that the fact that like something like this that is very big to us, I would say, is getting floated in a PR without actually having like an RFC behind it is kind of the concern, I guess. So like going back to that team, I know you know, I've extended the the fact that we have discussions here weekly about features that we want to implement, and the fact that there's previous work and then work in progress RFC for completely refactoring what our lifecycle events look like. My hope is that that team can maybe direct their focus to actually doing some design work with us here, and take a step back for now. From trying to implement this the way it is today. Yeah, that's just my own thoughts on it.
Do you know if their use case requires it to be implemented within the NPM CLI itself, or could they use like a custom tool that invokes Arborist?
No, it has to be in the CLI itself. As far as I understand it, WhiteSource has a tool that, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it will essentially, during installation, taps into lifecycle scripts like post install or pre-install or install scripts to essentially blow up when it sees that it's trying to install, that you're trying to install a dependency it knows that might have a vulnerability or malware in it, preemptively, given the fact that sometimes we can be slow to report on the NPM audit side those same malware. So they're obviously being very extremely vigilant, have a lot of automation on their side and their tooling to quickly capture what they think to be malware, and they are more proactive, and so they've provided this kind of tool that does this kind of work. So, Jordan, I saw you unmuted. Maybe you can add anything now.
No, you're good.
So there is a use case there, right? Like there is a tooling in the ecosystem. This is one example of folks using install scripts for something other than, let's say, building a package or installing native binaries. You know, this is an example of like, this is for security purpose, which has a legitimate, I guess, place. How do we provide that team with better tools? And so I suggested overrides potentially as an option for them. They could be maintaining a set of known bad versions that generates an overrides file that can be utilized. If they are controlling the environment, I feel like that's the only way they can truly like do some of this work. It feels like you know, potentially they could be shelling out to NPM or wrapping NPM. I've seen tools do that as well. MPQ is a tool that's like that, where it essentially wraps NPM and provides its own set of security guidance and sort of informed decisions around what makes what is, you know, this good security hygiene and practice in terms of installing packages, and sort of warns you ahead of time. That might be a path forward for that team. But yeah, I don't necessarily think we want to like walk back and get closer to the V6 version we had with the lifecycle scripts that we had there. We kind of want to move forward towards what I'm hoping we're all moving towards, which is, you know, reproducible builds, like a bit of immutability in your installation, and hopefully a lot more sanity in general. So any other thoughts, feelings on hooks?
I believe this also overlapped the conversation with the tree mutation event. That potentially is something that we can point people to.
Yeah, I noted that. We could add that. That's kind of like a stopgap for a lot of folks. So it's something that we should quickly do once our team is off fighting some fires and trying to get a pair back our priority 1 bugs. But it's definitely one of those things that should get done, I think, probably like relatively quickly in the next quarter. Cool. Moving on, and just notably, I might take the agenda label off that PR for next week and just give some feedback to that team. We had, for the record, they had reached out also by email to me directly. So ideally, I like to keep comms transparent and in the open. So cool. Moving on, PR 519. This is RFC 519, package distributions. I don't have an update here in terms of any work I've been able to do since last week. I know I promised that I would try to get to this. I've been a little bit busy. I'm not sure if there's been any feedback or any like updates here from other folks. I know it's got a bit of traction in the community. Some folks are reading this, especially the Vercel team is very interested in this landing and being able to support their use cases. So essentially no update here from me. I need to, yeah, go ahead, Roy.
I had a question because we also, last time we discussed this, we also touched on the optional dependencies aspect of it, right? Expanding to have optional dependencies, just have different ways of installing or not optional dependencies, right? And that would come together with this as a nice, better syntax to provide the package distributions. So did we decide whether we wanted to have a separate RFC for that, or if you were going to try to concentrate it all into a single RFC?
I don't know if I'm going to try to put it into a single RFC. Let me get some time here to try to fix this up, and then see, yeah, what we would want to do with optional dependencies, because
Yeah. I think it's a good idea to try to split them apart, because it might be just too much to have on a single one.
Yeah. And I just want to see where the overlap is, especially in terms of the conditional, like syntax, like how we're defining those. Like, is that something that can be shared across what we're going to do for optional dependencies? So that's why if I get some more time here, and what might be good is to, because I live and die by my calendar, is to actually schedule some time, maybe. And if folks on this call, Tierney, Owen, Jordan, if you're interested, we can even invite you, if you'd like to a session to try to draft what and sort of spec out what that an API like that could look like. So if you're interested,
Yeah,
let
sure.
me know. Cool. So action item there for me then is to schedule a call or a working session. New distributions. I think I have all your emails, so.
Yeah, another point, just to recap, if we do it separately, we can do a quicker RFC and even implementation for expanding the optional dependencies conditions. And then that if we can get that into the hands of users, into the hand of the ecosystem, even different ecosystems or packages like ESBuild, they can start using those new conditions to set up manually that workflow, and then eventually we land the package distributions on top of it.
Cool. I did that. Any other comments on package distributions or optional dependency improvements? Okay. Moving on to the very last item, which was associated with this. It's essentially the libc, adding libc fields to optional dependencies. So this is, I think, I put this here because it's essentially associated with this whole conversation. So I don't think there's any update to that either, unless folks had some comments.
I believe we can take the agenda label out of that one. I left a comment there after the last meeting saying exactly that we should follow up with a separate PR, but also trying to get more, expanding a little bit more than just the libc field.
Cool. And that brings us to the end of our agenda with 18 minutes to spare. Does anybody have any other topics they want to bring up while we've got your time? Feel free to ask tough questions if you want. Jordan, I know you're like thinking.
I'm thinking through.
What
have I already not talked about? That's what I'm trying to remember.
I would not try to poke Jordan. It might be unexpected.
I know. I do think it would be really nice around the distribution stuff if there was a way to have the test files and non-test files. I think that would please a lot of my consumers and would allow me to not break a use case that I'm very interested in. So I'm more than happy to make everyone's installs smaller if there's a way to do it without sacrificing the ability to get tests. So, doesn't have to be solved necessarily in that RFC, but that would be package distributions conceptually.
So just excited for the future in general, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's something we haven't talked about in a while: stage releases. Literally, so I will never publish from CI because that's the only irrevocable action. I only always do that as a human. But that means that a human's doing that on their local machine, and hopefully it's the right thing to publish, like the right stuff is on the file system. I would love the ability that RFC promises, which is to publish staged in CI, and then later have a human validate that and promote it. So I feel like the last time we discussed it, it probably required a lot of back-end work, but it would, given the new push towards security, it would dramatically improve the security of double-digit percentages of NPM's download traffic if I alone could do this. So it seems really important to prioritize that back-end work, and I would really love to take advantage of it. Using two-factor automation tokens, that's just a way to allow CI to go back down to one factor. That's not increased security. That's reduced security in constrained circumstances. I don't want that. So
yeah, if I could have snapped my fingers or had the team size 2 years ago, we would have been done with this already. But I didn't.
I'm wondering if the security framing from an external maintainer might help the company be more incentivized to prioritize it properly. If so, point me in a direction and I will go there and yell.
I've definitely been pushing on it internally. It's still one of the top priorities for me. So I'll continue to take your feedback. And
sending me a hardware key has very little improvement to security. Doing this has a very large improvement to security. So if that helps you look at the amount of money that was spent on the former and what could be spent on the latter.
Yeah, and we've this got brought up again at the package maintenance working group the other day, that one of the most long-standing PRs was to codify kind of best practices for CI publishes, like package publishing.
And there will be a lack of consensus right now about that. Whereas if you had staged builds and two-factor, you can create a scenario where every single person says, yes, this is secure. And maybe you could also use a two-factor token if you want to publish from CI. So that would be a great place to be.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I'm changing the topic. So if anyone else has something I want to put on that, absolutely feel free. Okay. One thing I do kind of want to follow up on is, I know I put out an RFC that I think was accepted. I believe it's accepted, or it's ready to be accepted for NPM audit licenses. I had initially begun working on that 6 months ago. I got it relatively working in that it did what I wanted it to. It turns out shipping that in Arborist is probably the better way to do it, because then we get a lot of other features for free. And I realized I was initially working on this with Roy, and then I started working on it with Isaac. I paired with Isaac for a while, and Isaac and I got into the Arborist stuff a bit. We were looking at it and talking about it, not actually implementing it. And that seemed to be the path of this is the correct way to do it. We don't get a lot of features if we don't do it through Arborist. I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm skilled enough to do it through Arborist. Arborist is a beast, and this specific implementation that Isaac and I kind of figured out would work is a relatively fundamental change to Arborist. It was basically adding in another, it's been 6 months since I've looked at the code, so I don't totally recall it, but basically adding in another class that allowed this information to be a bit more available. Is that something that I should try to figure out myself, or is that something that either someone in the community wants to work on, or is that something that the NPM team might be able to pick up or be interested in?
So one, the RFC still looks like it's open, so okay. I don't know why we haven't ratified it yet, so that might just be on us to go do.
Well, and also it's a little, it's blurry lines because RFCs are usually for CLI things only. And because this requires backend work, it's like.
That's audit assertions. Different than audit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No
spaced out.
worries.
Audit
No
assertions.
worries.
Yeah, that.
Yes.
I'm also excited about that one.
Yeah. Audit licenses is specifically what I'm talking about. Is that one still open?
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
PR RFC 182
Jesus,
npm audit
that's old.
licenses. Yeah, which is 100% best served and best built into Arborist itself.
Yeah.
Since it generates all the metadata associated with audits and meta vulnerability.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we need to get somebody else to pair with you, or somebody else to pick up the work even.
I'm happy to pair on it. Audit or Arborist is just it hurts my head. I'll be honest. It is intense, and especially adding an entirely new, like basically redefining how part of the, or at least in what Isaac and I were talking about, redefining how the fundamental structure works slightly. And expanding that is like, I do not have the context already around Arborist to be able to do that myself, I don't think. So yeah.
Cool. It'd be nice, and I'll quickly interject before Roy adds this, but it'd be nice if you had a simple query language to.
It would be.
Select the information. RFC incoming. I know. Hit me over the head if it's not open by next week. Go ahead, Roy.
I was just going to say, I looked at the RFC here. It looks like there's still the unresolved questions in bike chatting section there. Maybe like meanwhile, we can clean it up and get ready for ratifying.
Yeah, I think there might have been some slight details that change if given that it goes into Arborist, right? Like here in this PR, I specifically call out using I think like using the tool, but the tool becomes, I forget what the tool's called, but the tool becomes mildly irrelevant, if I recall correctly. Like we're not directly relying on it to like not shelling out to it. Yeah, licensee, thank you. We're not like shelling out to it like I was originally planning, and so that changes some things. But yeah. I'll happily go and re-review it. I might not get to it before the next RFC meeting. I am out most of next week. But yeah, happy to revisit this and get it done.
Yep, I think that would be great. Yeah, my concern is definitely that I know that you're extremely smart, and the fact that you find it permissively hard to do something that seems also like on from like 1,000-foot view seems pretty simple to do. So I'm definitely interested in facilitating this in a more general sense soon. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm happy to pair on this with folks. I just wanted this to move forward because I think it's something that is positive for the ecosystem. I personally fundamentally believe that licensing should not be locked behind paying money. I think that's absurd. So yeah, I do want to see this progress for sure.
Cool. Any other items, questions, topics folks want to chat about? We have about 7 minutes left. If not, I will give you all some time back today. And sounds like we got a couple takeaways. Expect me to reach out to try to schedule a call and to talk about package distributions, and then also expect me to do a bit of work on the RFC that I keep saying but won't name.
I'm happy to pair on it with you, Darcy.
It's like 80% done. Yeah.
Squeeze in one more quick thing. The explain stuff we talked about last week. Where would we land on that? Is that like we just need to make a PR, someone needs to do it, or is
just need to fix it? Yeah.
Okay.
It just should
cool.
work. It should work. Like you said, should work without.
I have two of them, but they're both related. One was about only prod, and the other was about without reified node modules.
I think we should be able to support both cases. I think that's the.
Cool. All right. If
Yeah,
I
I
have time,
think
I'll
this-
take a look at it here.
Yeah, I think the second one was about package only, package lock only flag, right? I think both
Yeah.
were fixable bugs, yeah, if I recall correctly.
Cool. Thanks.
Great. Well, with that, I will see you folks next week, hopefully, or async in Slack. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.